Throughout his public life, Donald Trump has cultivated an image of unmatchable philanthropy, presenting oversized checks for the cameras with a practiced beam. Yet he had never addressed an audience of actual career charitable professionals to justify why his organization utilized donated funds to acquire two portraits of himself. By the time the evening concluded, Trump would utter six specific words that his legal team would spend years attempting to suppress. Six words that accounted for the paintings, the sports memorabilia, the Parisian travel, and the $2.82 million in veterans donations directed by his political apparatus. It is all the same money. Why did he make this admission? You need to hear this context. The boastful statement occurred before the initial inquiry. The CNN set within the Kennedy Center was arranged for intimate conversation, featured an audience of 200 individuals selected to represent what the network termed philanthropy in America. This group comprised directors of food banks and homeless shelters, volunteers who had dedicated decades to grassroots fundraising, individuals who managed charitable resources with the meticulous precision of a surgeon, understanding that lives depended on their accuracy and transparency. Anderson Cooper stood at the center of the stage, positioned before a banner that read, "Philanthropy in America, Trust Democracy, Transparency and Accountability." Donald Trump had agreed to this appearance because his advisors considered the topic completely safe: charity, generosity, and his widely publicized foundation. Before the discussion officially began, Trump spoke, settling into his seat with the absolute assurance of a man who had never been required to justify his expenditures. "I want to ensure everyone understands something about me," he said, addressing the assembled crowd. "I am likely the most benevolent individual in this gathering, perhaps the most benevolent in the country. The Trump Foundation distributed $19 million to various causes, exceeding its total intake. I never accepted a salary, nor a single penny in administrative expenses. Show me a political figure who has personally contributed more," he challenged, holding up his hands. "I coordinated a televised fundraiser for veterans that generated $5.6 million in one solitary evening, and every single cent was directed to veterans organizations." He then turned toward Crockett. "My esteemed opponent this evening is a congresswoman whose background is that of a public defender, very commendable, very modest. However, I have personally contributed more to charitable causes in one fiscal year than she has earned throughout her entire professional existence. Consequently, I possess no concerns regarding this upcoming dialogue. The metrics speak unequivocally for themselves." He reclined, exuding complete satisfaction. Anderson Cooper then turned to Crockett, inquiring if the congresswoman wished to respond. Crockett was seated with her hands clasped upon a manila folder. Her facial expression was pleasant, nearly welcoming, the look of a professional who had spent years cross-examining individuals convinced of their intellectual superiority over everyone else in the room. "I appreciate that introductory segment, Mr. President, and I value your mention of the 19 million figure. I intend to examine that specific metric in considerable detail this evening." She paused briefly. "However, since you reference your benevolence, I have one straightforward question. When was the last occasion you personally contributed your own funds to the Trump Foundation?" Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I have contributed millions over the preceding years. The Foundation's public tax documentation reveals that your final personal financial contribution occurred in 2008. Following that year, for the remaining 8 years of the organization's existence, every single dollar originated from other donors, individuals who contributed because they observed your name and placed their trust in it." She angled her head slightly. "Therefore, for an entire 8-year period, you accepted public acclaim for generosity that was funded exclusively by other people's money. Is that the $19 million figure to which you are referring?" A ripple of quiet conversation passed through the audience. 200 professionals who manage other people's resources for a living exchanged significant glances. They grasped the implications of the query. They foresaw its trajectory. Trump did not. 45 minutes prior to the telecast, within Trump's designated waiting room, the atmosphere had been one of anticipated triumph. "Benevolence," Trump remarked, adjusting his necktie while looking in the mirror. They wish to discuss benevolence. That is my most potent attribute. His campaign advisor looked up from a briefing tablet. Sir, they might reference the portraits, the Bondi contribution, the Iowa funds. The paintings were situated at charitable auctions. Trump dismissed with a wave of his hand. I was assisting those organizations by submitting bids. No other attendees desired the artwork. I was doing them a significant favor. Sir, the audience this evening includes individuals who operate charities on $50,000 total annual budgets. When they learn you utilize $17,000 of foundation resources for an excursion to Paris, it was a charitable auction and the funds went to the organization hosting the event. Why is this concept so complex for you to grasp? The resources move from my foundation to another charitable entity. That is the fundamental mechanism of charity. Eric Trump, standing near the doorway, nodded in agreement. That is absolutely accurate, Dad. The money ultimately went to a charitable cause. $19 million, Trump asserted, pointing directly at his reflection. More than the organization actually took in. Show me any individual who can legitimately make that claim. Show me anyone. His campaign advisor exchanged a glance with the communications director. Neither individual mentioned what they were both simultaneously considering, that the $19 million figure encompassed grants that were directed exclusively by Trump's presidential apparatus rather than the foundation's governing board, that the organization's board, comprised solely of Trump and his 3 eldest children, had not convened for a formal meeting since 1999, that Trump himself had not contributed a single personal cent since 2008. Yet Trump possessed zero interest in these specific details. He never did. 5 minutes, he stated confidently, 5 minutes, and everyone will comprehend that I am the most benevolent president in American history. 4 floors beneath him, within a compact preparation room, Jasmine Crockett was not analyzing talking points, legal depositions, or strategic playbooks. She was meticulously scrutinizing tax documentation. Schedule 990, Part 9, Line 6, AE, she whispered, running her finger down a specific column of data. 2007 expenditure, $20,000. Recipient, Children's Place at Home Space. Charitable auction, purpose, a painting. Her chief of staff, Marcus Chen, looked up from his laptop computer. A painting of what exactly? Of him. Crockett did not look up from the documents. A 6-foot-tall likeness of Donald Trump, acquired at a charitable auction utilizing foundation resources, currently displayed at the Trump National Golf Club in Brearcliff Manor, New York. Marcus stared incredulously. He utilized charitable funds to acquire a portrait of himself, or rather 2 such portraits. Crockett flipped to a subsequent page, 2014, an additional portrait costing $10,000. This specific item concluded its journey at the Trump Doral Resort in Florida, also acquired utilizing foundation resources, and also displayed in a for-profit commercial business. She placed the tax forms down and retrieved a collection of legal filings, and that merely constitutes the art collection. There is additionally a $12,000 Tim Tebow sports helmet, a $17,000 excursion to Paris, $258,000 in legal settlements for his private businesses, and $2.82 million in veterans donations that were directed by his presidential campaign apparatus. Marcus slowly shook his head in disbelief. What is the operational strategy for this evening? Follow the money path. Crockett opened the manila folder and commenced organizing the documentation systematically. 2 stories ago, I conducted a cross-examination. In the last scenario, I deciphered a strategic playbook. Tonight, I am assuming the role of an accountant. Every solitary dollar that entered the Trump Foundation, I intend to trace to its actual destination. Which specific item do you believe will have the greatest impact? Crockett paused thoughtfully. The portrait is the ideal opening segment because it is utterly nonsensical. A supposed billionaire utilizing donated funds to acquire a 6-foot painting of his own countenance and displaying it in his private golf club. That transcends mere corruption. That is comedy. And comedy resonates and remains memorable. People will retain the image of the portrait long after the specific figures fade from memory. She closed the manila folder. However, the definitive conclusion is the Veterans Fundraising event. When 200 individuals, including actual military veterans, learned that donations generated for service members were controlled by a presidential apparatus and utilized as rhetorical props at political rallies, that is the precise moment the room will collectively turn against him. Do you anticipate he will attempt to walk out? No. Crockett's facial expression conveyed absolute certainty. That constitutes the critical distinction this evening. He cannot depart, not while positioned in front of military veterans, not on a live CNN broadcast. Walking out on charitable directors and combat veterans would create a video segment that would be broadcast in perpetuity. He will be forced to sit there and endure the situation. She smoothed her jacket. And that scenario is ultimately worse than him departing, because the entire nation is going to observe a man who designates himself the most benevolent individual in America sitting in complete silence while 200 people who actually administer charity stare directly at him. Back on the main stage, Crockett was establishing the fundamental premise. Everyone in this gathering administers resources that other individuals entrusted to your care, she stated, looking out at the audience. Donors contribute because they possess faith that their dollars will assist someone. A meal, shelter, a second opportunity in life. That trust is paramount. It is the bedrock of every charitable organization in America. She then turned toward Trump. This evening, I would like to undertake a straightforward process. I intend to follow the money, dollar by dollar, from the moment it entered the Trump Foundation to its actual destination. Because the precise destination of charitable resources reveals everything necessary regarding the individual who controls them. She opened her manila folder. The president asserts his foundation distributed $19 million to charitable causes. While that figure may be technically accurate, what occurred to that capital along the way? The diversions, the halts, the acquisitions, that is the narrative that has never been articulated on national television. She looked toward Anderson Cooper. Every item I am about to present originates from the Foundation's own tax filings, its own 1990 documentation, records the organization submitted to the IRS under penalty of perjury. Anderson Cooper nodded in acknowledgement. Congresswoman, please proceed. Trump shifted uncomfortably in his seat. His facial expression had altered slightly. He had not anticipated a discussion centered on tax filings. I would like the audience to examine Exhibit A, Crockett stated. The screen positioned behind them was illuminated. A painting materialized on the screen, 6 feet tall, oil on canvas. It was a portrait of Donald J. Trump, rendering him as a younger man with blonde hair swept back and a confident beam, the type of artwork a man commissions when he desires the world to perceive him as he perceives himself. This painting was acquired in 2007 at a charitable auction hosted by the Children's Place at Home Space, held at Mar-a-Lago, Crockett detailed. The purchase price was $20,000. The designated buyer was the Donald J. Trump Foundation. She allowed the image to remain prominently on the screen. The resources for this purchase originated from the Foundation's charitable funds, donations from individuals who contributed capital to assist others. Where is this specific portrait located today? She asked Trump directly. It was situated at a charitable auction that I was supporting. Where is it located now, Mr. President? It was placed in storage at one of my properties. It was prominently displayed on the wall of the Trump National Golf Club in Briarcliff Manor, New York, a private commercial club where annual membership fees cost $200,000. You were decorating your private business, acquired utilizing charitable funds. A second image materialized on the screen, an additional portrait of Trump, smaller in scale but undeniably recognizable. Exhibit A2 2014, an additional portrait, this one acquired at a charitable auction for $10,000, also utilizing Foundation resources. Subsequently discovered displayed at the Trump Doral Resort in Miami. She placed her notes down. 2 portraits of yourself totaling $30,000 in charitable donations, both displayed within your for-profit business enterprises. Trump leaned forward defensively. No other attendees submitted bids on them. I was the exclusive bidder. I was assisting the charitable organization by artificially increasing the final price. You were the exclusive bidder at an auction for a rendering of yourself. You completed the transaction utilizing other people's donations and subsequently transported the artwork home and displayed it within your own building. She paused significantly. That does not constitute charity, Mr. President. That constitutes shopping utilizing someone else's credit card. Bitter, cynical laughter rippled through the assembled audience. A woman stood up in the third row. She appeared to be approximately 55 years old, with closely cropped gray hair and the utilitarian attire of someone accustomed to physical labor. My name is Linda Park, and I serve as the executive director of Grace Community Kitchen in Detroit. We provide food for 400 families on a weekly basis, operating on a total annual budget of $90,000. She looked directly at Trump. Every solitary dollar that enters my organization is meticulously accounted for. Every receipt is systematically filed. Every donor receives a comprehensive report detailing exactly where their contribution went, because that is the meaning of trust. That is the fundamental definition of charity. She pointed toward the portrait still illuminated on the screen behind them. Your foundation utilized $20,000 for a painting of your own countenance. Are you aware of what $20,000 acquires at my community kitchen? It funds 6 months of meals for 400 families. That equates to 2,400 families who could have received nourishment. Her voice hardened considerably. Instead, those resources acquired a picture of you, and you displayed it in a private golf club where the membership fee alone exceeds my entire annual operating budget. Trump initiated a response. I contributed millions to various organizations. I have never received a single dollar from your foundation, Mr. Trump. I verified the records. Complete silence ensued. Crockett resumed her points, her voice maintaining an even, methodical cadence, the precise tone of an accountant reading from a ledger. Each item was a line entry. Each line entry represented a specific horror. Exhibit B, 2012. A Tim Tebow autographed sports helmet acquired at a charitable auction for $12,000 utilized foundation resources. She looked at Trump. The current location of this helmet is unknown. Exhibit C, 2008, a luxury excursion to Paris, acquired at a Gucci Foundation charitable auction. The package encompassed dinner with actress Salma Hayek. The price was $17,000, paid using foundation resources. She paused. Mr. President, did you personally enjoy that excursion to Paris? It was a charitable auction and the funds went. Did you participate in the excursion, yes or no? But the specific details of that auction are, you utilized $17,000 of charitable donations for a luxury vacation for yourself, including dinner with a globally recognized movie star, funded by individuals who contributed capital to what they believed was a benevolent organization. Additional laughter erupted from the audience, but this time it possessed a harsher, more critical edge. A woman stood in the fifth row. She was younger, perhaps 40 years old, wearing a blazer that had clearly seen better days. My name is Diane Reyes, and I operate a youth mentorship program in Phoenix called Brighter Futures. We serve 150 children annually, tutors, academic supplies, field trips, graduation ceremonies for children who are the first individuals in their families to complete middle school. She looked at Trump with the expression of someone who had spent years explaining to skeptical donors why every single dollar is critical. Our total annual operating budget is exactly $17,000. I possess that specific figure memorized because I have personally generated it dollar by dollar over the preceding 9 years. Bake sales, grant applications, telephone calls to total strangers requesting $20 contributions. Every year I generate $17,000, and every year 150 children receive a mentor who genuinely believes in their potential. She allowed the specific figure to hang in the air for emphasis. One solitary excursion to Paris encompassing dinner with a movie star, or 150 children mentored for an entire year. 150 children who are told for the initial time in their existence, you are capable of this, someone believes in you. That was the choice your foundation finalized, Mr. President, and it selected Paris. She resumed her seat. The woman seated next to her, a volunteer coordinator for a veterans group, placed a supportive hand upon her shoulder. Crockett's tone shifted noticeably. The accountant's voice faded away. What replaced it was slower, more calculated, the voice of someone initiating a discussion regarding a subject that was utterly devoid of humor. Now, let us transition from the nonsensical to the serious. She retrieved a fresh document. On at least two distinct occasions, the Trump Foundation utilized charitable resources to settle legal disputes for Mr. Trump's for-profit business enterprises. She read directly from the legal filing. In one specific instance, the municipality of Palm Beach, Florida, assessed a fine against Mar-a-Lago for displaying an American flag on a flagpole that exceeded the permissible height regulations. The Trump Organization resolved the dispute by agreeing to contribute $100,000 to a veterans' charitable cause. This would be considered a reasonable settlement, except the $100,000 did not originate from the Trump Organization. It originated from the Trump Foundation. In an additional instance, the Trump Organization resolved a separate legal conflict. The cost was $158,000, again paid using foundation funds, $258,000 in total. Your for-profit business enterprises were subjected to legal action. Your for-profit business enterprises lost, and your charitable organization, constructed from other people's donations, settled the financial obligation. She looked directly at Trump. That does not constitute a charitable expenditure. That constitutes utilizing a tax-exempt nonprofit entity as a personal checking account for your private business ventures. Trump's facial expression had become visibly red. The legal settlements were directed to charitable organizations, so technically the money, the resources departed the foundation and settled your private debts. Whether those funds eventually arrived at a charitable entity does not alter the fundamental mechanism of what occurred. Your foundation was utilized to settle your business's legal obligations. That action is designated as self-dealing, and it is illegal. Subsequently, Crockett did something she had avoided all evening. She ceased looking at her documentation. She closed the manila folder completely. She rotated her body to face Trump directly. And when she spoke, her voice was fundamentally different, quieter, heavier, as if the words themselves possessed physical mass. January 28, 2016, Iowa. She allowed the specific date to resonate with the audience. You coordinated a nationally televised fundraising event for veterans, utilizing it as an alternative to attending the scheduled Republican presidential primary debate that same evening. You stood upon that stage and informed America that you were generating funds for the men and women who served this nation. You asserted it was about the troops. You asserted it was about honor. American citizens opened their wallets and contributed, generating $5.6 million in one solitary night. $2.82 million of those funds entered the Trump Foundation. She picked up a specific document. However, the foundation itself did not determine the ultimate destination of those resources. Your presidential campaign apparatus made those decisions. She read directly from internal correspondence that had been accepted as evidence in the New York Attorney General's investigation. Your campaign advisor, Corey Lewandowski, instructed the foundation regarding the timing of grant distributions, the precise amounts to give, and which specific organizations would receive the funds. It was not the foundation's governing board, which, as we have already established, had not convened for a formal meeting since 1999. It was your campaign, and subsequently, days preceding the Iowa caucuses, you stood at political campaign rallies wielding oversized checks displaying the Trump Foundation's name, presented to veterans organizations while your official campaign logo was displayed behind you and news cameras recorded the scene. She looked toward the audience. The veterans involved were real, the generated funds were real, but the charity itself was political theater. It was a political campaign event disguised as benevolent generosity. A court of law subsequently concluded that you breached your fiduciary obligations and that the fundraiser resources were utilized for Mr. Trump's political campaign efforts. You were legally ordered to pay $2 million in financial damages. She paused significantly. You informed America you were contributing to veterans. What you were actually executing was utilizing their service record and other individuals' donations to secure an election victory. A man stood up within the audience. He appeared approximately 55 years old, possessing a military bearing that years spent behind a desk had not significantly softened. His suit was neat, but clearly not expensive. On his lapel, he wore a small American flag pin, the kind that veterans wear not as mere decoration, but as a core component of their identity. My name is Tom Wheeler, and I served 22 years in the United States Marine Corps, 3 combat deployments, Fallujah, Helmand Province, and Camp Lejeune. I operate a nonprofit organization in Des Moines that provides transitional housing for homeless veterans. His voice was controlled, the steady cadence of an individual trained to deliver mission reports under immense pressure. However, there was something beneath the controlled exterior, something that combat veterans in the audience would instantly recognize: the quiet fury of an individual who has been profoundly betrayed by someone he was systematically taught to respect. Our organization received $100,000 from the Trump Foundation following that Iowa fundraising event, and I want to be unequivocally clear about something. That capital changed lives. It placed roofs over the heads of 12 veterans, 12 men who had been sleeping in personal vehicles, public shelters, and beneath bridges. Men who served this nation and returned home to absolutely nothing. That $100,000 provided them with a door possessing a functional lock and a mailbox bearing their own name. I will never diminish the positive impact that money achieved. He looked directly at Trump. However, I subsequently watched the political rally on television. I watched you display an oversized check bearing our organization's name, your campaign banner displayed behind you, the crowd cheering loudly. And I realized at that moment that we were not beneficiaries, we were a prop. His jaw tightened in anger. Our organization is strictly nonpartisan. We serve veterans regardless of their political affiliation or who they vote for. We are legally required to be nonpartisan. Our tax-exempt status depends entirely upon it. When you positioned us on a stage at a political rally without our knowledge or prior consent, you did not merely utilize our name, you endangered our nonprofit legal status. You placed everything we had meticulously constructed, 20 years of dedicated work, at significant risk for the sake of a photo opportunity. He straightened his posture. The resources were welcome, Mr. Trump. The manipulation was absolutely not. You possess zero right to designate yourself benevolent when you are utilizing other individuals' donations as political campaign advertising, and you possess zero right to claim you love our veterans when you treated us like a mere stage backdrop. Several veterans within the audience nodded in solemn agreement. One woman in the second row, wearing a Veterans of Foreign Wars cap, pressed her hand to her mouth and looked away. One final item, Crockett stated, and this specific point unifies the entire narrative. Her voice altered once more. The accountant's persona was gone. The auditor was gone. What replaced it was the voice of a prosecutor connecting the definitive piece of evidence. 2013. The Florida Attorney General's office had received 22 formal complaints regarding Trump University, the identical Trump University we discussed in a preceding dialogue. Consumers accused the entity of fraud. Pam Bondi's office was actively evaluating whether to participate in New York's existing investigation. Around this identical time frame, Bondi's political committee solicited a financial contribution from you. She allowed the significance of the timing to resonate with the audience. The Trump Foundation dispatched $25,000 to the political group supporting Bondi's re-election campaign. That contribution was illegal. Tax-exempt charitable foundations are prohibited, absolutely and unequivocally prohibited, from making political financial contributions. This constitutes one of the most fundamental rules within nonprofit jurisprudence. Every individual in this room is aware of that. Following the receipt of the contribution, Bondi's office decided against investigating Trump University. And when the illegal contribution was subsequently discovered, the foundation did not merely accept the fine, it actively attempted to conceal the payment. The foundation misreported the contribution on its official tax return, listing a completely different recipient in a separate state possessing a similar name. It was exclusively when investigative journalists uncovered the discrepancy that the foundation admitted to the error and settled a $2,500 penalty. She looked directly at Trump. Your charitable organization made an illegal political payment to the Attorney General, who is currently deciding whether to investigate your potentially fraudulent business activities. After receiving those funds, she terminated the investigation, and when this action was discovered, your foundation falsified a tax return to conceal it. Trump's facial expression was deep red with anger. $25,000 constitutes a minor clerical. $25,000 directed to the precise individual at the critical moment is not a clerical error, Mr. President. It constitutes a transaction. Crockett organized the documents within her manila folder slowly, deliberately, as if systematically arranging a definitive financial accounting. Allow me to summarize the Trump Foundation's charitable activities, she stated, reading directly from her notes, her voice flat and even, the precise voice of an auditor delivering finalized findings. 2 portraits of yourself, $30,000, a sports helmet, $12,000, a luxury excursion to Paris, $17,000, legal settlements for your for-profit business enterprises, $258,000, an illegal political contribution to an attorney general who is actively investigating you, $25,000, and $2.82 million in veterans donations directed exclusively by your presidential campaign apparatus. She closed the manila folder completely. Mr. President, I have one solitary question, and I would appreciate a direct answer. She looked him in the eye. Is there a distinction within your own mind between the Trump Foundation's capital and your personal capital? Trump's hands gripped the armrests of his chair. His face was a mottled red color, and then, resembling a structural dam that had sustained pressure for too long, he broke. Listen, I established that foundation. It bore my personal name. I generated the funds. I determined where they were directed. Whether those funds acquired a painting or constructed a medical hospital, it is exclusively my decision. That is how the mechanism functions when it is your foundation. You are the decision maker. He aggressively jabbed his finger toward the audience. And every solitary dollar, every single dollar, was directed to good causes. The portrait capital went to the charitable organization hosting the auction event. The veterans' capital went directly to veterans. It is all the same money. My money, the foundation's money, the donor's money. It all concludes by achieving good results. I perceive no distinction whatsoever, and no individual should. He stopped speaking. 200 charitable professionals stared directly at him in complete and total silence. Crockett allowed the moment to resonate. 5 seconds, 10, 15. The oppressive silence filled the Kennedy Center like water accumulating rapidly within a locked room. Subsequently, she spoke quietly. It is all the same money. She looked toward the assembled audience. The President of the United States just informed a gathering composed entirely of individuals who manage charitable funds for a career that there exists no distinction between charitable donations and personal capital. Every individual in this gathering understands that charitable funds are legally held in trust. They are subject to strict legal restrictions. They belong explicitly to the public purpose for which they were originally donated, not to the individual whose name is displayed on the entrance. What he just articulated, it is all the same money, I determine where it is directed, constitutes the textbook definition of treating a charitable entity as a personal checking account, which is precisely why a court of law legally terminated his foundation, ordered him to pay $2 million in financial damages, and required his adult children to participate in mandatory training regarding nonprofit governance standards. She paused significantly. He did not misspeak. He genuinely meant those words. He sincerely possesses zero understanding of the distinction. And that realization, more than any portrait, sports helmet, or Parisian excursion, constitutes the admission. Trump surveyed the room. His eyes darted rapidly toward the exit location. His body shifted within the chair. The visible instinct to stand up, to depart, to storm off the stage precisely as he had executed before. Twice before on similar stages like this, he had ripped off his microphone apparatus and walked away. But this specific room was fundamentally different. 200 individuals were watching him intently. Military veterans with service pins on their lapels, women who operated homeless shelters, men who organized community food drives, individuals who had dedicated their entire careers to performing the exact work Trump claimed to perform and executing it honestly, transparently, for a minimal fraction of the resources and none of the public acclaim. Anderson Cooper, seemingly reading his mental state, stated gently, "Mr. President, we still possess questions from the audience members." Trump's jaw clenched visibly. He looked toward the exit once more, then at the broadcast cameras, then at Tom Wheeler seated in the fourth row, with his shoulders squared and his gaze steady. Departing this stage, walking out on these specific individuals, on military veterans, on charitable workers, on a CNN broadcast would generate a video segment that would be broadcast on every screen across America for an entire week. He reclined again. He folded his arms tightly across his chest. His mouth formed a thin, rigid line. When Anderson Cooper inquired if he wished to offer a response, Trump shook his head once emphatically. He did not utter another word for the remainder of the telecast. The ensuing silence was demonstrably worse than any verbal outburst, worse than storming off the set, because it communicated to the immediate audience and the millions watching at home that for the primary occasion in his existence, Donald Trump had absolutely nothing to say. Not because he had been actively silenced, but because he had articulated everything and it had fundamentally destroyed him. When it became unequivocally clear that Trump would not speak again, Anderson Cooper turned back to Crockett. "Congresswoman, would you care to address the audience?" Crockett stood up. She did not look at Trump. She looked toward the 200 individuals who had sat through every piece of evidence, every document, every specific revelation, and who had recognized with the absolute precision of professionals exactly what had been described. He stated, "It is all the same money," she repeated. And he sincerely meant it. That does not constitute a temporary verbal gaffe. That constitutes a comprehensive worldview. Within his mind, everything bearing his name belongs exclusively to him: the foundation, the donors' resources, the veterans' fundraising event, the auction acquisitions. It is all his to expend however he pleases, on portraits of himself, on excursions to Paris, on his business enterprise's legal debts, on his political campaign. He genuinely possesses zero understanding of the fundamental distinction between charity and self-interest. And that realization constitutes the most alarming aspect, not that he violated the law, but that he is unaware that he violated it. He remains unaware because within his operational world, there exists no boundary line between giving and taking. It is all interchangeable. It is all fundamentally him. She turned specifically to the audience. "However you grasp the distinction, every individual in this gathering understands it. You live that reality every single day. You meticulously count every solitary dollar. You systematically file every individual receipt. You lie awake at night experiencing anxiety regarding the succeeding year's funding sources. You expand operating budgets that would cause a Fortune 500 chief financial officer to weep in despair. And you execute this work not because it is financially profitable. God knows it is not profitable, but because someone in need requires it. He possesses zero comprehension of what you do. He informed you this evening that it is all the same money. It absolutely is not. You grasp that it is not. The law recognizes that it is not. The families you nourish and the veterans you shelter and the children you mentor grasp that it is not." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was significantly quieter. "I desire to conclude with the specific portrait, not because it represents the most significant financial figure, but because it communicates everything necessary for you to grasp. Somewhere in America, an individual donated hard-earned money to the Trump Foundation, perhaps $50, perhaps $500. Maybe it was a retired educator living on a fixed income. Maybe it was a small business owner who believed in contributing back to the community. Maybe it was a military veteran who believed Trump's foundation would assist other veterans. They contributed because they observed his name and placed faith that it signified something meaningful. They believed their resources would assist people. That specific capital entered the foundation's accounts. The foundation utilized that capital at a charitable auction event, and at that auction it acquired a 6-foot-tall painting of Donald Trump. The painting was subsequently shipped to a private golf club where annual membership fees cost $200,000. It was displayed on a wall within a dining area where wealthy individuals eat lunch. A total stranger's act of benevolence became wall ornamentation within a billionaire's private country club. A retired educator's $50 contribution became a minute fraction of a brushstroke on a portrait of a man who would never know her name. That scenario constitutes the Trump Foundation captured in a single visual image, not a charitable organization, but a mirror. A man who looked at other people's benevolence and observed exclusively himself. She turned and walked back toward her seat. She did not elevate her voice. She did not raise her fist in a gesture of defiance. She simply sat down and clasped her hands together. The audience commenced applauding, initiated by one individual, then 10, then all of them standing, clapping. Some individuals were weeping, others were nodding with the somber satisfaction of people who had finally heard someone articulate what they had intuitively known for years. Trump remained seated in his chair, arms tightly folded, jaw locked in rigidity. He did not acknowledge the applause. He did not look at any individual. He stared intently at a fixed point upon the floor and remained motionless. Anderson Cooper expressed gratitude to both participants and concluded the telecast. The cameras ceased recording, the studio lights were dimmed, and Donald Trump, still remaining seated within his chair, was escorted from the venue through a side exit by his handlers. He did not converse with anyone on his way out. The broadcast concluded at 10:17 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. By 10:30 p.m., the specific video clip was circulating everywhere, featuring Trump's face visibly red with anger and jabbing his finger for emphasis. It is all the same money, my money, the foundation's money, the donor's money. It all concludes by achieving good results. Within 20 minutes, it's all the same money was the top trending topic. By midnight, it had been viewed in excess of 70 million times. By morning, the figure reached 190 million views. Not a Charity trended at the second position, and hashed The Portrait trended at number 3. At 10:32 p.m., Trump posted on Truth Social, "Complete setup, CNN is dead, fraudulent audience full of Democrat operatives." At 11:14 p.m., I contributed $19 million to charity, more than any individual in politics. Where is the gratitude? At 11:47 p.m., the paintings were situated at charitable auctions. The capital went to charitable causes. No individual understands how business functions. At 12:23 a.m., ghetto. When I stated it is all the same money, I intended that it all goes to beneficial causes. The fake news is distorting my words again as they consistently do. At 6:05 a.m., the veterans absolutely loved me. I generated $5.6 million for them in one single night. Identify one Democrat who has achieved more, I will wait. At 1:38 a.m., the woman from the soup kitchen is a planted actor, never heard of her, nobody has heard of her, probably funded by Soros, investigate. At 2:02 a.m., Anderson Cooper should be terminated. He permitted them to ambush me, 0 follow-up questions directed at Crockett. At 2:31 a.m., I am the solitary president who has ever been attacked for being too benevolent. Consider that. They are attacking me for contributing too much. At 2:58 a.m., going to sleep. But the reality is, I am the most benevolent president in American history. No individual even close. The figures do not lie. History will evaluate me very favorably. At 6:23 a.m., just observe the video clip again. I was accurate. It is all the same money. That is the mechanism of how charities operate. The fake news media does not comprehend fundamental charitable jurisprudence. At 6:47 a.m., why is no individual discussing the $19 million? Why is it consistently the painting? A painting I acquired to assist a charitable organization. This nation is afflicted. He had posted 31 times prior to 7 o'clock a.m. Each individual post validating Crockett's central point more comprehensively than she ever could herself. He was not attempting political spin. He was not retreating. He was intensifying his original position because he genuinely, sincerely possessed zero understanding of the fundamental distinction. And every occasion he reiterated, "It is all the same money," he validated precisely what she had articulated to the nation, that within his mind, charity was merely another synonym for his own personal brand. At 7:15 a.m., his campaign advisor finally established communication with him. "Sir, every occasion you mention money, you're exacerbating the situation. The charity legal specialists are losing their minds. The RNC is receiving numerous telephone calls from donors inquiring if their contributions are being utilized for personal portraits." Trump's response, posted at 7:22 a.m., My charity lawyers are the absolute best. They distributed $19 million. That is more charity than any foundation in history, no organization even close." At 7:38 a.m., just discovered the mentoring woman from Phoenix receives government grant funding. She is funded by taxpayers, yet she is attacking me for being benevolent. The hypocrisy. The parenthetical attacks directed at Linda Park and Diane Reyes backfired immediately and spectacularly. Within hours, both women's respective organizations experienced unprecedented surges in donations from individuals desiring to demonstrate in the most tangible method if possible what actual charity resembled. The morning television programs were unanimous in their analysis. He stated, "It is all the same money," and he sincerely meant it. A CNN legal analyst remarked, "In 30 years specializing in nonprofit jurisprudence, I have never heard an individual describe self-dealing so flawlessly and so proudly. This specific example should be instructed in law schools." What is remarkable, one commentator observed, is that he remained seated there for the entire duration. He did not walk out. He was unable to, not positioned in front of veterans, not on live camera. Consequently, he simply ceased talking, and somehow that scenario was demonstrably worse, because everyone could visibly observe it. The precise moment he realized he had articulated too much and there was no viable path for retreat. On Fox News, the resulting coverage was meticulously cautious. The portrait visual was not displayed. Linda Park was not quoted. The minimal number of commentators who addressed the broadcast adhered strictly to one central point. The foundation distributed $19 million to charitable causes. However, one Fox anchor deviated from the established messaging. "I researched the portrait," she stated quietly. "I possess zero political spin for a 6-foot painting acquired utilizing charitable resources and displayed within a golf club. I simply do not." An awkward silence ensued on set. They rapidly transitioned to a commercial advertisement break. Within 48 hours, the phrase, "It is all the same money," had been formally cited by 3 separate state attorneys general in existing investigations concerning nonprofit fraud activity. One legal brief quoted the phrase directly. The former president's public acknowledgement that he viewed charitable resources as indistinguishable from personal resources constitutes evidence of the mens rea necessitated for civil fraud. Former Trump Foundation employees came forward, not a significant number as the organization had been compact, but sufficient to matter. A bookkeeper who had processed the portrait acquisition and flagged it for a supervisor recounted, "I informed them it appeared inappropriate," she told the Washington Post. They responded that Mr. Trump desired the painting. That constituted the conclusion of the conversation. An accountant who had formulated the tax filing that misreported the Bondi contribution stated, "I was instructed to list a distinct recipient. I grasped it was inappropriate, but when you are employed by that specific organization, inappropriate just signifies the method by which things are executed." A specialist in nonprofit governance appeared on CNN the morning succeeding the broadcast. "What is extraordinary," she remarked, "is that he articulated the violation in real time on live camera and was completely unaware he was executing it. It is all the same money constitutes literally the specific mentality that nonprofit jurisprudence exists explicitly to prevent. The entire structure of tax-exempt charity is constructed upon the fundamental premise that it is not the same money, that donated resources possess a distinct legal status separate from personal capital." He demolished that essential distinction in one solitary sentence, and he exhibited pride in doing so. Within 1 week, the portrait visual became perhaps the most extensively utilized meme image in political history. The 6-foot painting of Trump was digitally inserted into every imaginable context, displayed within a homeless shelter, positioned in a food bank distribution line, mounted upon the wall of a veterans hospital waiting room, displayed behind a family consuming a meal at a soup kitchen. Every variations carried the congruent caption, "It is all the same money." A dedicated website materialized, itsallthesamemoney.org. It systematically tracked charitable expenditures by political figures and organizations, flagging instances of self-dealing, undisclosed conflicts of interest, and misallocated funds. Within 3 months, it had documented financial irregularities at 47 distinct foundations and political action committees spanning both major political parties. Crockett introduced the Charitable Transparency Act within the House of Representatives. The proposed legislation advocated for 3 specific reforms: mandatory independent financial audits for all foundations controlled by political figures, enhanced penalties for self-dealing actions by foundation officers, and a public database detailing charitable expenditures by any individual holding or seeking federal office. He informed us, "It is all the same money," Crockett stated at the press conference announcing the bill. Consequently, the legislation is straightforward. We are going to ensure the public can observe precisely where every single dollar is directed. If it is truly all the same money, then no individual should possess anything to conceal. 48 hours subsequent to the broadcast, Linda Park's community kitchen in Detroit received $30,000 in fresh donations. The financial support arrived in increments of $10, $25, and $50 from individuals across the nation who had viewed the town hall event and desired to demonstrate to her and to themselves what actual charity resembled. $30,000, the exact combined price of the 2 specific portraits. Linda posted a photograph on social media showing the kitchen was densely crowded, volunteers wearing aprons, families waiting in line, children seated at long tables consuming plates of spaghetti and garlic bread. In the background, a hand-lettered sign that was displayed on the wall for 9 years read, "Everyone is welcome here." The caption stated, "This constitutes what $30,000 resembles when it is directed to actual charity. Not a portrait visual, not a private golf club. Meals for families, 400 of them this week." The most popular comment, with in excess of 200,000 reactions, read, "Now that constitutes charity." Diane Reyes' mentorship program in Phoenix received $48,000 after Trump's social media post attacking her went viral and backfired spectacularly. She utilized the funds to expand the program to accommodate 200 children. At the enrollment ceremony for the new group of participants, she informed the children, "Someone extremely famous stated that all money is interchangeable. It absolutely is not. The resources that facilitated your presence here were donated by individuals who genuinely believe in your potential. That reality makes it fundamentally distinct from every other dollar in existence." Tom Wheeler's Veterans Housing Program received $175,000 in unsolicited financial contributions, sufficient resources to provide housing for 18 additional military veterans. He posted a photograph of the most recent resident, a 58-year-old former Army sergeant, standing within the doorway of his new apartment holding a set of keys. The caption read, "This constitutes what charitable resources resemble when they are directed where they are supposed to go." 6 months following the telecast, Jasmine Crockett delivered the keynote address at the National Charity Alliance Conference held in Washington, D.C. The auditorium was completely full. Executive directors, program officers, development personnel, volunteers, the individuals who keep the nonprofit sector operational through sheer dedication and caffeine, and the resolute belief that benevolent generosity still possesses meaning. Crockett waited for the applause to diminish. He stated, "It is all the same money," she began, and in a specific sense he was accurate, just fundamentally not in the method he intended. She looked out at the audience. "It is all the same money. A donor's $50 contribution and a billionaire's $50 contribution possess the identical inherent power to nourish a family, to shelter a military veteran, to mentor a child. Every single dollar is equal. Every single dollar is paramount." That is the reality he should have comprehended. However, what he actually intended was, "It is all my personal money. my name displayed on the entrance, my exclusive decision where it is directed, portraits, Paris, legal bills, campaign rhetorical props, all interchangeable. What he should have stated instead, what every individual in this room grasps inherently, is it is all their money, the donors, the publics, the individuals who trusted us to be better than our limitations. She paused thoughtfully. Charity does not constitute generosity utilized from your own personal wealth. Charity constitutes the responsible stewardship of other people's trust. And when you violate that paramount trust, when you acquire paintings of yourself, utilize their donations, you have not merely violated the law, you have shattered the foundational mechanism that makes benevolent giving possible. He designated it the same money we designated trust. And trust, once fundamentally shattered, constitutes the most costly thing in existence to repair. She straightened her jacket. However, here is what I believe with conviction. I believe trust can be reconstructed, one solitary dollar at a time, one single meal at a time, one family at a time. I believe this because I have witnessed you execute it within soup kitchens and public shelters, in after-school programs and veterans' housing units, and in every quiet, unglamorous location where actual charity occurs. He conceptualized charity as a portrait visual on a wall. You grasp that it is a plate on a dining table. Continue your vital work. The nation is observing now, and they finally grasp the critical difference. The ensuing applause lasted for 3 minutes. Some individuals were standing, some were weeping, and others were doing both simultaneously. 1 year following the telecast, Tom Wheeler received a letter. It was hand-delivered to the front reception desk of his organization's office in Des Moines, a converted warehouse located on the east side of the city, where 12 formerly homeless veterans now resided in small, clean apartments featuring functioning locks on the doors and their own names displayed on the mailboxes. The correspondence was from a man named Danny Cordero. He was 58 years old and had served within the Army for 11 years, including 2 distinct combat deployments to Afghanistan. Subsequent to separating from the military service, he had battled PTSD, lost his employment, lost his apartment, and spent 4 years living on the streets of Des Moines. Tom's organization had located him sleeping beneath a highway overpass in January. By March, he was residing in one of the 12 apartments funded utilized the Iowa fundraising resources. The letter stated, Mr. Wheeler, I watched the CNN program the evening it was broadcast. I was seated within the apartment your organization assisted me in locating. It constituted the first occasion in 4 years I had watched television in a room that was truly mine. I heard you inform Mr. Trump that your organization was not a mere rhetorical prop, that the money donated for veterans was sacred, that we deserved more than a photo opportunity at a political rally event. I desire for you to grasp that I am composing this letter at a desk, my personal desk, located within my apartment. The primary desk I have possessed in 4 years, the primary apartment I have possessed in 4 years. That constitutes actual charity, not a portrait visual, not an oversized check displayed on a stage. A functional desk, a door featuring a lock, a mailbox bearing my name. I express gratitude, Mr. Wheeler, for everything, Danny Cordero. Tom read the correspondence twice through. Subsequently, he folded it meticulously and pinned it to the corkboard located behind his desk. Positioned adjacent to it, he pinned a newspaper clipping detailing the broadcast, featuring the split-screen image of Trump with arms tightly folded and jaw clenched, refusing to speak, and Crockett standing positioned before the audience wielding a folder of tax documentation like a lantern illuminating the darkness. Beneath the clipping, utilized meticulous handwriting. Tom inscribed 4 specific words. It is not the same. He designated it all interchangeable capital, portraits, Paris, legal debts, campaign rallies. Within his mind, charitable donations and personal resources were interchangeable, and he informed the entire nation so on live television within a room completely full of people who grasped the reality. A court of law legally terminated his foundation. He paid $2 million in financial damages. His adult children were legally required to participate in classes instructing how to responsibly manage a charitable entity. And across the nation, individuals who dedicate their existences to actual charity, to actual generosity, to actual responsible stewardship, to actual trust, finally heard an individual articulate what they had intuitively known for years. If you have ever donated resources to a cause you genuinely believed in, share this narrative. If you know an individual who manages every charitable dollar with unwavering integrity, transmit this to them. If you have ever wondered regarding the actual destination of your contributions, retain what Crockett articulated. A total stranger's act of benevolence became wall ornamentation within a billionaire's private country club. That scenario constitutes the Trump Foundation, not a charitable organization, but a mirror reflecting self-interest. Charity is not a portrait visual on a wall. It is a plate positioned on a table, a roof shielding a military veteran, a desk where a man composes his primary letter in 4 long years. Not honor the same.